Hello, my name's Tom Palmer and I'm a children's author, and I've been working with the National Literacy Trust on a set of work to do with Refugee Week, and in 2023, this year, it is Refugee Week from the 19th to the 23rd of June. And we've created some resources. We've created 5 stories for you to read in class, and then a set of, well, it's kind of 6 writing sessions where you can develop a story based on a refugee and based on your research. But before I introduce all of that and tell you a bit about it, I thought it's important for me to tell you why I want to do a set of work about refugees. A lot of my books feature refugees, and I think, and like before I talk about the books I've written, I should talk about some of the books I've read. Over the years, I've read some really powerful accounts of what it's like to be a refugee, such as this book, which had quite a big influence on one of the characters I created in D-Day Dog, my book. I've also read this book, which some of you'll know Owen Colfer from his fiction, and he's been involved in this graphic novel about one boy's epic journey and hope of survival. And also another book, definitely the most, my favourite book ever, is Anne Frank's diary. Anne Frank was a refugee from Germany. She went to live in Holland, and then, as I'm sure you know, she had to hide in Holland for many years as the Nazis were persecuting the Jews. And I find books like this and these very, very powerful as a reader. And it makes me think that as a writer, it's important for me to write about refugees as well. I go into a lot of schools. I go into at least 100 schools a year, and I meet refugees from lots of different countries. People who've had to leave different countries such as Syria, Afghanistan, Ukraine more recently, and I think it's a really important part of what sort of a country we are, how we treat refugees, and this is something I've explored in the books I've written, particularly, I suppose, after the war. This is about a group of 300 children who survived the Holocaust and come to live in the UK as refugees. They come to live by Lake Windermere in Cumbria, and that is them, and it's a true story. And I was very lucky to meet some of these children who are now very old men, and they have told me their stories about being a refugee and what it meant to them that a country took them in after they'd been through horrific experiences during the Holocaust. Sorry, just on the dog, go there, good boy. They'd been through horrific experiences during the Holocaust, and what it was like for them to come to a safe country, which England was and the UK was for them when they came in 1945. And that's how I went about writing that book, by talking to actual refugees and who went on to do remarkable things. Two of these children, for instance, who were Holocaust survivors in 1945, one went on to be a weightlifter in the Olympics for Team GB, and one of the others went on to design the camera through which we are able to look at the footage of Neil Armstrong, the first man to walking on the moon. And that camera was designed to work in space by a Holocaust survivor, a refugee. And learning from these refugees that I meet and talking to them, it really makes me understand that I have to include those sorts of stories in my books. A, because I think it's important to spread those stories around, but B, so that I can understand them. So when I was writing about, there's a girl from Syria in this book, and she, and indeed in this book as well, and they were very much inspired by me reading this book about this girl who was a refugee from Aleppo. And writing the stories does as much for me in learning about what it's like to be a refugee and how we as a country should treat refugees as it does reading the stories. And that is why we've created this body of work. So we've created 5 stories, and we've created a set of 6 exercises you can do to help you write your own story about refugees. And the 5 stories that I've written, in fact, here they are. They're called Boat People, And they're particularly called boat people. What I've done is, oh, and by the way, this was just for the record, this idea of 5 stories about boat people from the past was my wife's idea, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. But I've written the stories, and they're about people who've had to escape from danger, terror, and fear from one country to another by boat. The first one is set in 1943, and it's some Jewish people fleeing from Denmark going to Sweden. The second one is set in 1914, and it is about Belgian people escaping from the German invasion, the First World War, and coming to live in the UK. The third one is set in 1975, and that's about Vietnamese boat people, as they were called by some at the time. And then the fourth one is about Afghanistani and Afghan family who go to try to reach Australia by boat. And they're all written, and they're available for you now. The fifth one is going to be made available for you on the 23rd of June, which is the last day of Refugee Week. And the reason for that is it's going to be set that week. I'm going to be doing some research into people who are inevitably going to be trying to come across on boats from France to England over the English Channel. And I'm going to be writing a story based on a very, very recent incident of that hasn't happened yet. But I'm going to wait until as late as possible to write that story, so it's completely up to date and relevant. And so they're the 5 stories that I've written, and they're for you in the classroom. They're about a 10-minute read, and they're for you to read if you want to and discuss, or you can take them home and read them. But I've also done a set of exercises, writing exercises, where you will be asked, if you want to write stories about a refugee, and you can choose a refugee. I've suggested Alphonso Davies, the footballer, Rita Ora, the musician, and Anne Frank as possible refugees you could base your story on. But you can pick your own as well. And what the plan is that you'll do a series of sort of exercises based around the questions who, where, when, what, how, and why. Also, if you're talking about those in book terms, that's character, setting, story, plot, and motivation. And that's how I go about writing a story. I think of the who, what, where, when, why, and that helps me develop a story. And if I've been into your school, I've probably done one of those sessions or workshops with you already. And then the last one, so there's those 5 workshops, and then the last one is where what I do is I get my resources. I think of the who, what, where, when, why, and I write things down on bits of paper, and then I chop it up with a pair of scissors, and then I move it around. And I've tried to do that in the last video. I've tried to do that for you. Whether it works or not is you'll have to judge. It's a bit. I'm not very good at articulating that part of my writing process. So what I've done is, in these videos, I've tried to tell you what I think would be a good idea to do, but I've tried to model it as well. And I know modeling is something that teachers use as a way of showing how things can be done. And I've showed you how I would do it, but lots of people do it in different ways. We all do it in different ways. So give it a go if you like it, use it. If you don't, you can write stories in a different way. Anyway, I think I've covered everything. Other than to say thank you to the National Literacy Trust and their sponsors for giving me this work and the opportunity to explore more my personal understanding of what refugees have been through, why they've come to, why they go from one country to another, and trying to overcome a lot of the stuff you see in the news, which some of it's quite difficult and confusing to understand. And I think for me, doing research, reading real stories and writing stories myself helps me overcome some of that confusion. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and listening, and I hope you enjoy the process. And if you want to follow up on any of the other books that I've written, these are my books that feature refugees. If you're interested in checking any of them out, and I'm sure you've got copies in the school library. Thank you for listening and watching.